round session on national perspectives on the stormwater and MS4 sector. And he is calling in from the DC area. I'll pass over to Seth.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Stefano. Appreciate it. All right. As you can see, I'm with the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, Washington, and I'll talk about what that is as we go along. But I will say Washington is one of our members, so this does tie in. But my talk here really is, I want to talk about national perspectives, what's going on at the national level, and I guess I'll just go to my agenda. I want to talk about what's going on at the national level, and by the time we're done here, I want to hopefully connect what's going on at the national level to why it matters at the local level. That's really what I hope we can get out of this. That's the point here. So I'm going to talk about some stuff. I might skip through some things depending on time and whatnot, because I really want to get to that last point, which is again focusing on the on the fact that things matter at the local level when we're looking at the big picture as well. Okay, so real quickly, I'll talk about NMSA. Again, that's the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, not association. I make the same mistake myself oftentimes. But that's what NMSA stands for. To talk about some sector milestones, so what's going on currently with the Biden administration and federal Congress. Since I'm in the DC area, that's kind of the world I live in to a certain degree. Then I'll talk about some big picture policy regulations, other things happening at EPA and evolving policies and topics and stuff that we're doing as an organization as well as working with others. And again, like I said, at the end, this tie into national to local. Hopefully that makes sense. Before I get going on too far, I want to kind of set the table here. I guess it's setting the table. I got a couple tables shown here. I grew up Catholic in a large family. I guess that's a redundant statement. In the Midwest, and I was the youngest of not just my only family of 5, but many cousins. So we would go to my grandmother's for Thanksgiving, and we would say, there'd be the adults table, right? It's all the fine silverwares there and the good food, and then all the kids would have their own separate tables. And I was at the smallest of the small kids tables. So maybe this is me projecting a little bit, but the point is that stormwater has been at the kids table for a long time, and what we're now seeing, and everyone else has been at the big table talking about infrastructure funding, and they think of roads and bridges or water and wastewater. Stormwater is getting to that the adults table, and that's part of the context I want to provide here. So that's the way I'm seeing it, and that's the context of what's going on. Again, I mentioned I wanted to talk real quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on my organization, but I'm the executive director for this organization. So we've only been around for 2.5 years, 3 years. So yeah, we were founded in 2018, and it's a coalition. So it's a national coalition. It's an organization of organizations, and so we don't have individuals who are members. We have individuals who are representatives of groups. And the Washington Stormwater Center is the representative organization for Washington State. And we have 23 total states included. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. The motivation for formation, we just wanted to have a unified voice, stormwater in the MS4 sector. There's really there's a lot of groups at the national level that talk about stormwater and stormwater related issues. No group focuses solely on the MS4 sector. So that's kind of that's what we're focusing on here. And the MS4 sector is relatively young. Again, we've been at the kids table for a long time and distributed, kind of like our infrastructure itself. So we wanted to provide a more unified voice. And we want to be proactive, especially in policy discussions. Oftentimes we're reactive. You have to be both proactive and reactive, frankly, in the policy world. We wanted it to be on both sides. We just wanted to drive the discussion, also be at the ready for when things pop up, which things pop up all the time with regulations and rules and whatnot. But we wanted to bring the MS4 context to the table when policies are being developed. And we also want to connect and unite all these different programs across the country. We want to raise the public image and awareness of stormwater, and make it, show the value of it, and make it seem as a resource, which it is, instead of a burden everywhere. So that's the deal. Our vision is very simple. We want to be one of the groups that are helping to help provide clean water to the nation. We want to do that through effective MS4 programs, efficient, cost efficient as well as MS4 programs. And we want what we do to be based on science and information. 4 major action areas. I'm not going to get into all of this, but because there's a whole spiel I could do on all of this, but I'll just say that our top mission is, because we're a 501c3, so we're education and oriented. We want to provide support and information to the MS4 organizations out there, which, you know, most are small and mid-sized. Most are struggling, frankly. So we want to provide support. A lot of this is messaging and communication. That's such a big part of so many stormwater programs, MS4 programs. We want to be able to take that research organization and disseminate that technical information to the ground level as well. So that's another thing we want to get out of this. And and we've been active on the policy and advocacy side, frankly, because there's just so much going on in that world right now. So it's not something that we, we put on the bottom of the list for a specific reason, actually. But you'll hear some of them more on the policy side today. I mentioned that we've got 23 states total, all the states in blue, including, I've got Washington highlighted there. So we've got 23 state and regional organizations in 9 of the 10 EPA regions. So we have pretty good coverage across the country. There are a couple states, Wisconsin and Oklahoma, we've been talking to that hopefully will join on in the near future. So we'll be able to say we've got half the country in terms of the number of states. And we've been in dialogue with a number of other states, those ones that are shown in red. So we've got pretty good coverage, especially for only being around for a couple of years. We've got individual MS4s now that have joined. So Baton Rouge just joined as an individual MS4. So we also allow individual MS4s as well as organizations. And we have affiliate members, which are like corporate members. And you can see all those folks that are listed here as well. They can be nonprofits, they could be technologists, whatever. So just so you know where I'm coming from and what we're about. And this is our leadership. Scott Taylor's he's from California. He's our chair. Randy Neprash is from the Minnesota City Stormwater Coalition. He's our vice chair, and Jennifer Watson with Tennessee Stormwater Association. She's our treasurer. So just so you know where we're coming from. Okay, now on to the real show. So 2 big sector milestones I want to talk about. The first is the ASCE infrastructure report card. This comes out every 4 years. So the last one was 2017. And now it just came out 2021, and you can see for the first time highlighted there in the yellow, the red square, that stormwater has been included. That's something that took a lot of time and a lot of when I say lobbying, lowercase L lobbying, a lot of our working with ASCE, working with other organizations. WEF, Water Environment Federation, was a very strong champion in this side. And ASCE said, hey, we've been wanting to include stormwater for a long time. However, we just haven't had the data. Thankfully, WEF, and I'll talk about what they did next, stepped up and provided some critical information. We helped them out. They led the charge, but we were a supporter on that. So that's a major milestone. I can't overstate how big of a deal it is that we are now alongside transit and ports and drinking water and wastewater, and we've got a grade of D. So clearly we've got strong needs. This helps so much on the advocacy side when we go to the Hill and we go other places that say, look, we are a thing now, and we've got some real problems. So the second milestone I wanted to mention, I mentioned Water Environment Federation, WEF. They've done 2 MS4 needs assessment surveys, one in 2018 and one in 2020. We've been involved with both. We've got a lot of input from Washington communities, which we greatly appreciate. So if you were part of that, it's something that I'm sure WEF appreciates as well. There's a lot that comes out of that, and there's a URL there. Go check that out if you want to. There's a lot of great information out there. And this just came out. This kind of came out to coincide with the ASCE report card. But the bottom line is that there's an estimate of between $18 and $24 billion that's being spent on MS4 programs across the country. But to put that in context, we've got $8.5 billion estimated annual funding gap. So that's if you look at the $8.5 billion versus, let's say, $22 billion for that kind of the mid range there, or the middle of that range, that's a pretty significant, funding gap compared to the actual budgets that are out there. This is a big deal in having these numbers, and this is all statistically significant. So this is not like 4 data points. This is a good number of data points that represent the sector. These type of things are really helpful, and these are things that you should be aware of. And if you were participating in it, very much appreciated. Okay, so I want to talk about some current things that are going on in the Biden administration. This just came out, I think, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, the Biden infrastructure plan. They called it the jobs plan, I believe. It's $2 trillion. They call it, refer to it as a once in a generation investment. I'm sure that's true. We haven't seen anything like this for a long time. This could be the largest ever, period, if you look just at total numbers. But certainly the largest since maybe LBJ, something like that. Included in this, right, is over 110 or 111 billion dollars in water investments. Frankly, a lot of it is drinking water right now, and there's $50 billion cited for infrastructure resilience. So, I will say that first of all, the biggest win here is that stormwater is actually, you can see that quote there from there. Stormwater is included as a term. That by itself is a huge thing for stormwater. But there's not a whole lot of money specifically in there right now. We have yet to be seen, it's yet to be seen. This is gonna change as it goes to Congress and whatnot. But at least we're part of this. So who knows what's gonna happen exactly, but at least it's a good start. In Congress, there's a number of bills, and I'll talk about two specific bills in a second. But we've been working on that to review bills to see if stormwater is included in this legislation. We spend a fair amount of time there. There's only so much we can do as a 501c3 instead of a C6 that can do a lot more. But we are engaged. We've been working to get things like there's a proposal for 3 to 5 centers of excellence for stormwater as in one of these pieces of legislation. That's exciting. That's been around for several Congresses, but I think this is a lot more likely to actually move forward now. And there's also 2 different types of grants that are being proposed, planning and project implementation grants. There's information there. It's a big deal. We've also worked to identify what's our shovel-ready project capacity. What can we bring to the table as an infrastructure? We went through this type of exercise and we asked the sector, hey, what projects do you have sitting around that could be built in 24 months? So basically, if you had the funding, what could you do? And we just did that for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that last summer when there was a lot of talk about this going on the first time. We had over $1.3 billion in stormwater projects that just through that short amount of time. So there's a lot that stormwater can play a really big part in this, and something that we're trying to really emphasize for folks. So overall, we're trying to get stormwater at the same levels as wastewater and drinking water. That's the point here. 2 specific pieces of legislation in Congress right now is S914 and then HR 1915. These are 2 sides of the same coin. This is what normally happens. The House has their own version, the Senate has their own version of bills, and then they come together and then they go to conference and they kind of hash things out. There's a couple things in there that, there's basically, we're talking billions. These are B's, are billions. To see billions of dollars in something that's related to water and having specific targets for stormwater is really exciting. Just keep in mind that these are over 5-year time periods. So if you have to divide this up by 5 billion, but there is watershed-based, stormwater-oriented, stormwater reuse type of things that are part of this. So interesting and significant things are happening at the national level. These are still going to move over through Congress this summer. We'll be working. We and others will be working to make sure that we have a hand in what's going on and try to push as much as we can for stormwater to get its place. So I'm going to talk about some regulatory issues that are out there that you guys should be aware of. The first is the e-reporting rule. This is electronic reporting rule. This is something that's been around for other sectors. Now it's the MS4 sector's time. So basically, this is everything that you do in a program has to be submitted in a specific electronic format. This has to be all done by 2025, meaning like everybody has to be doing this at this point in time. We're just starting this out. We're working with EPA on this. So we actually have a no charge webinar later this month. If you want to learn about that, please check this out. But something that it's going to be on the horizon. There might be some policy and regulatory issues that are not so clear on this. So something to keep on mind. Waters of the U.S. is out there. Obviously, that's ping-ponging back and forth. It's going to be a top priority for the Office of Water. We're probably going to go back to the Obama era rule. Our interest is to make sure that that we keep exemptions for stormwater infrastructure in there. So if a constructed wetland does not become and has a specific purpose as a stormwater practice, does not be considered as water of the U.S. because that's a challenge for our programs. There's something called the Sewer Overflow and Grants Program, often referred to as OSG program. I'll just say this: there's a lot to be said. This is a new program for stormwater. A lot of funding for stormwater that way. It looks great in many ways, but we feel like it's biased towards SSOs and CSOs, not for MS4 programs, which is something that we have a problem with. We sent our comments in, And it went ahead as it is anyway. And they just last week, the EPA launched $67 million in initial funding for this. Legislation that I talked about before is seeking to increase this funding a lot. Our hope is to try to get more of that funding to go towards MS4s because we feel like there's significant needs there. Stormwater trash is a big deal. 80% of all plastics are from land-based sources, 30% from tire tread wear. These are big deals. California's in the front, and I think Washington's out there too. So we've been involved with this. We're involved with EPA's Trash-Free Waters program, which is in their Office of Oceans, Wetlands, and Watersheds. We actually had a convening yesterday. There's a couple convenings going on. There's another one that's going to be in a couple other weeks. And then one in May after that. We're working as a partner along with the American Chemistry Council and their plastics division, as well as others, to focus on this issue. A lot to be done here. Not much more to be said other than this is a big deal, and we're tracking this as well. We're involved with EPA's Water Reuse Action Plan, which is called the RAP. Lots going on in this. Right, this started in the previous administration. Same with the Trash-Free Waters program was a big deal in the Trump administration. They're continuing it on, and the Trash-Free program is continuing on, which is great. And this Water Reuse Action Plan was started in the Trump administration, is continuing on now, which is great as well. There's 70 some action plans, so this is all about water reuse. And there was not much on the stormwater side initially, and we commented on that. They said, okay, well, now that you've commented on it, you got to do something about it. So we've been working with EPA, especially Region 9, focusing on this. We've held a series of webinars. We've got a YouTube channel. You can click on that to see that. There's going to be another one coming up, and we're going to have a convening later this year to talk about this, specifically on stormwater capture and use, which is something that we see a lot in arid areas, but we're finding out there's a lot more diversity on this issue across the country. Overall, we've been engaged with EPA quite a bit, and we have a good relationship with, I want to say NMSA has a good relationship with EPA. We've developed something called the web-based National MS4 resource. You can go to our website to check that out. It has basic information for those who don't know that much about the MS4 sector. We've been doing a lot of other things. I don't have time to get into it, but I will say SRF is something that the State Revolving Fund is a big issue. We need to get more funding to the stormwater sector, and we're not getting as much as we would like. So we've been advocating on that, and then we'll continue to do so. Atlas 14, this is a new way to, or an updated way to have flood frequency and storm event frequency and depth estimates. It's a long story. The short version of this is that this has been done on a state by state or region by region. The Pacific Northwest was one of the last to get adopted, and Texas actually just got theirs adopted a year and a half ago. The point is that we are using old data. This is a way to capture and use all the new data to say we know what a 100-year event is. And when Texas updated theirs and through this new type of approach that's put together by NOAA, they found out that their 100-year event went from 13 inches to 18 inches. I mean, that's a big deal. The previous 100-year event is now closer to the 25-year event. What we've been advocating for is national coverage, not state by state, and to do this every 10 years. This actually passed legislation and has been signed into law. So this is something that is a victory for us. We're also focused on source control. And again, I think the Pacific Northwest has been a leader in this area. We've already talked about aquatic trash. That's a big deal on the source control side. But on the chemical side, there's millions of chemicals out there. We don't know what those impacts are, and especially how they interact with each other in different environments. We're focusing on that. That's something that the MS4 program and sector hasn't done as much of, and we're trying to change that. 6 PPDs is something that came right out of research in the Washington area, Washington State. PFAS, zinc, copper, all of these things are things that we're going to look at. Green chemistry, TSCA, RCRA, these type of approaches to try to eliminate as much as we can the harmful pollutants in our environment. So that's something that's different, and something we're trying to change change the way that we do business, I should say. Two other things I wanted to mention, and then I'll wrap up real quickly. NMSA has recently set up 2 centers of excellence of our own. One is on community-based public-private partnerships, and one is on stormwater testing. You've heard about that from Doug Howey and Carla Melissa in the previous session. I'll just say this on the community-based P3 side, we've got grant money to work directly with communities, and we're doing this across the country, direct support to look at this new approach to do more green infrastructure, do it more cost effectively in a quicker way, and maximize the benefits to local communities. And that's really what this is about. There's actually legislation in Washington State that changed, that was changed to update and allow communities in Washington State to pursue this type of approach. If there's any interest in that, let me know. Stormwater testing, again, you heard a lot about this before. I'll say NMSA has picked up the ball from WEF, which did a great job of launching this, and we're basically trying to leverage the great work that's being done by Department of Ecology and the Washington Stormwater Center, and make that a national type of program. We're moving forward. We're doing fundraising right now, and it's looking good. So hopefully we'll move forward. So why does this all matter? So just real quickly, when you are at the local level, you can become part of the conversation at the national level. It's a lot easier than you might think to keep up with current events. There's a lot going on. You can engage with different folks across the country, and we engage with national organizations all the time, and you could be part of that conversation. I will say the most exciting thing is that we're such a young sector, which is challenging, but also we can help to shape the sector in a much bigger way, much more effective way than others in other sectors that are more, the world has formed already. We're having a significant impact, and we're just getting started. I'll just say a couple things that, we need to have local input, because in national stormwater rulemaking, sorry, I'm just trying to rush through this, was tried in 2009 to 2014 and failed. Why is that? Many reasons why, but I think one of the reasons is that we didn't have enough input, I think, at the local level. I think we need to change that, and hopefully that'll happen. We're looking at maybe we should have an Office of Stormwater Management. There's an Office of Wastewater Management in the stormwater sector and MS4 sectors underneath that. Maybe we should have an Office of Stormwater Management that's at parity. But we need local input and advocacy and for that. And on the funding and financing side, again, stormwater gets the shaft in my view. And I could go on for days about this, but I'll just say this. On SRF, we've only received 3% of funding across the 30 years plus of the SRF program. That needs to change. We need to have a different way of getting funding and financing to the sector, because we've got significant needs. But that means that we need folks at the local level to say, this is why we need money. This is how we would use it, and advocate for it. So anyway, a lot more to be said. Sorry, I rushed through a lot of that. And I'm probably coming up on my time, Stefano, but you can let me know if how things look in terms of questions that are out there. So.
Great. Thanks, Seth. That's really interesting to get a roundup on all of that. And we do have just under 10 minutes, about 7 minutes for questions. So I've got a couple here from the chat that I'd like to share with you. Mm-hmm. Sarah Hamilton has asked, when will we expect the Atlas 14 updates for WA state specifically? He was talking about Texas, but what about WA?
I have to look into that. You said Sarah asked that question. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah. So I can't. The last I heard is that I think it was Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and I don't know how far it went out. At least those 3 states, if not a couple others, in the Pacific Northwest, we're looking at trying to basically all the states have to get together and chip in money to do this. I can't remember where. I think the Pacific Northwest was the last place to do this. This actually started in a kind of a chunk by chunk state or groups of states back in 2004. I mean, it's been going on for a while. But to answer your question, I don't know. But I think it's going to happen. I don't know. I'd have to get back on that. I'm not really sure. I apologize for not knowing exactly. But I will say, with this new legislation that passed, and wasn't any legislation I talked about here, is something else that I could talk about. But in general, I'll just say that has already been signed into law, and it's going to take some time. So it might be a couple of years, but I don't know. My hope is that it's going to happen sooner than that. But if I can get information, Stefano, I don't know if that's possible. I can follow up with Sarah directly. And I want to find that out too, to be honest with you. It kind of bothers me that I don't know, because at one point in time I knew the status of that, but I don't know exactly right now.
Great. Thanks, Seth. And so we have another question, and please put any questions you have in the chat, and I'll ask them of Seth. A second question is regarding a citizen's perspective. And this is from Makena Lindberg. And the question is, from a citizen's perspective, how would an individual then advocate or support these programs? And then if we've got time, I've got one more question or two more questions coming in.
Okay, that sounds good. You said McKenna was the name? Yeah, okay, McKenna. I think the individuals have a lot of, they can play a significant role, frankly. I think some easier ways, or kind of low-hanging fruit ways of getting involved would be find a local organization that is tied to this, whether that's I'm on the East Coast, so out here what we see are like friends of this creek or this river or this whatever. That is a good, in my view, a good way to start to get involved with stormwater sector. I think that there's also adopted drain programs I heard that are happening around the country. Seattle, I think I was just on in an event with folks with SPU, Seattle Public Utilities, yesterday, and they were talking about how they are doing an adopted drain program, which actually started out of about 5 or 6 years ago. That approach is, it's obviously adopt a highway, adopt a stream. So now there's an adopted drain where you basically take ownership over a drain, make sure that it's cleaned out, and that if it's not, then you let somebody know, or you do that yourself. And there's guidelines to all this stuff. But the point is that there's a way to get involved at that local level when you take ownership over our infrastructure, which is what we should really do. So, and a lot of that came out of an approach at Hamlin University, a small university in St. Paul, which is, it's interesting stuff. But they've been really effective in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. They've got thousands of this, and they've got a whole GIS platform that show all the different drains, and it's pretty powerful. So the power of big numbers can be really helpful. So there's all of us get involved. Individuals can get involved and make their impact locally. Collectively, it can be a huge magnitude of impact. So anyway, those are a couple of thoughts that I have right now. And I didn't want to get into the legal, like the lawsuit thing, but that's more of I think environmental groups lead that cause. But I would just say that there's a lot of different opportunities usually with your local municipality or other types of programs like that. That's where I would start.
Great. And Seth, we have time for just one more question, 2 more minutes left. If you could, I'll try to combine them if it's possible. So the question's really around grant programs and the broader definition of stormwater reuse, how that is included. And then secondly, about public-private partnerships and how that might work in grant funding. Okay.
Any specific type of grants, or is it just a general question?
That was for we might need to follow up on email with that. It's regarding the WASFAP grant funding. Yeah, maybe that one's better to follow up directly. And
I'd have to get it familiar with that. I will just say this real quickly, and then we can wrap. Then we can be done. Stefano, if that makes sense to you. I'll just say this: that I know that the stormwater reuse definition is a tricky thing, and the programs that I talked about, the grant programs at the federal level, are pretty broad with their definitions, and they refer to stormwater reuse, I think, and we prefer the term stormwater capture and use, and that can go down to the rain barrel level. We often don't think of rain barrels in that context. We think of more campus-wide, large building-wide, regional, something that has a broader impact. Rain barrels are great, but they don't have the same impact that others at a larger scale have. It certainly is a stormwater capture and use type of thing, but it doesn't have the same technical impact that way. So, but I would look into that on the P3 side or on the public side, public-private partnership side of things. I don't know. I'd have to look at the specifics of that grant program you're talking about, Stefano. So I won't even try to speculate, but I'd love to see that because I'd like to understand what's going on that front.
Okay. Thanks, Seth. Well, we've got to wrap up. Really appreciate this insight across the MS4 nationally. And thank you for all attending, and we will pass on those questions remaining for Seth to follow up directly. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Stefano.